Let's do this.
Right. This is amazing. So, welcome everybody to the vulnerability advantage. And if you are thinking vulnerability, how is that an advantage? We're going to get into it because the world is different today than it used to be. I mean, don't you agree,
Yes,
Azine?
no, especially in this era. I mean, first of all, welcome, and I'm so happy to be here. And I think vulnerability in this world is so important because we now live in a digital era where now AI and everything is taking over. And I think the realness behind a brand and a person, and even in leadership, like it's so important to display that even stronger and create this connection. So I think it's an important topic for 2024 as a business owner, any creator that you are in the space.
Mhm, mhm. I think it's, just, going way back because 'cause I'm older than you, although I feel like I look like a baby because thank you, mom, with the sunscreen. But, I am in my 50s, so hooray me, and I can tell you that when I started out, even 10 years into my career, there were these buzzwords, buzz phrases of "bring your whole self to work," but that was like a cleansed self, and there was a lot of fear around what that was, and you didn't talk about your kids, and you didn't talk about your family, and there were a lot of closed doors, and today it's different, right? There is an advantage from talking about your whole life,
Yeah.
sharing your whole life, and, not having a breakdown in
Mhm.
front of colleagues or but there's also a much grayer area between colleagues and friends now, and I think that shows more respect. What's your take on today's leadership environment, whether you're a leader in a business leader or a leader in academia, you're a professor, but we're all speakers and advocating on behalf of the subjects that we talk about. So
Yeah.
what are you observing?
Yeah, so what a great question. I think in terms of the leadership, what I see a lot is that a lot of leaders, especially high performance, they are creating pressure to stay always like professional. They feel like they always have to be strong and be always well. And I think at some point as a leader, even as a leader, this vulnerability is for yourself as well, for your well-being to express it, but it's also for the team. And what I observe again in the workspace, and even if you're not an entrepreneur or business owner, personal leadership is so crucial for, a mom, for anyone in corporate. Like you're leading yourself, not just for business, it's like your well being, health, the happiness, romantic relationships. So it's really about turning inwards in you and looking like how can I activate my personal power and not just act beyond, like circumstantial. And a lot of leaders, they're like short-sighted, they're looking at the situation, and I think it's so much more creating and doing the moves beyond any circumstance. Like for example, business coaches, for example, they only sell when they feel like they're going to sell their offer, but you have to show up even when there is no seller or buyer in the beginning,
Mhm.
and even when things get hard. And I think one of the things, and this is a question I got, is that, where's the fine line between being too vulnerable? Is there such a thing as of being too much sharing? Should I document my whole family life and my whole problems into my brand? Or like where's the fine line? And I personally found that, I'm curious to hear you as well, but like I kind of see that it's all about the intention behind. I'm not saying, for example, for everyone to share their dog and their personal life and what's been
What
going
you
on.
had for breakfast and like
Yes, I think like I see, especially on social media platforms, every platform is so different. Like
Mhm.
Instagram is very instant, and I treat the things like almost a TV reality show. And I
Mhm.
think it creates the human connection, sharing some insights and things that, like, okay, I have a family. Okay, I'm going out for a walk, and this is a realization I have. And one of the biggest things that I see with a lot of entrepreneurs out there is they're putting their content and things out there like, this is the offer, this is how I do, these are the 3 tips in my niche and target audience. But they forget that you're a human as well, you have a life. It's about creating a mind-blowing life. And yes, there is a professional part in it, and I also believe there is a maturity in the things you say. And based on my own story, without going too long, when I went through certain horrible experiences, I didn't share all of the things right away. The next months after the experiences of going through abuse, toxic relationship, it even had no relevance back then to my business. But after a year, and I recovered, and I felt a pull, and that's a long story on when you feel like you have to speak up, and it feels like a calling. This is where I tied in to share this as personal brand and tied it in like why this led me to what I do today. So that is really important. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Allison. Like, do you think there is such things as over vulnerable, or how do you integrate vulnerability in your brand?
That's such a great question. Thank you for bringing up, that there's so much to unpack with what you just said, and I am mind blown just by that mic drop statement. This is about having a mind blowing life, not fulfilling. Nobody says fulfilling. Like, I want to have a fulfilling life. Like,
Mm,
jolly, good. But but they and when you're a leader, it doesn't necessarily mean you're the CEO. You could be leading culture. You could be leading advocacy in your community. You could be leading like an education nonprofit as a mentor. So leader is a very ubiquitous term, and depending on how you want to show up in the world, it doesn't matter if you're a C level, or if you are just showing up in a way that shows that you are trustworthy, you are credible, you are there to serve. So that's how I see a leader. You're When you said that people come out and they sell, people can smell that.
mm,
It smells terrible. And it feels, as a recipient, it feels like you are like right up in my grill, or like you're throwing a brick through my front, from my front window, and saying like, pay attention to me, here, here, here. And I can't take that in. And instead I put up my invisibility shield. I'm like, I can't, right? And it's
mm,
the same if you're leading people. If every time you come in a room and you're just giving people their marching orders, they don't get a chance to know you and trust you. And some of the most memorable and impactful relationships I've had with mentors and managers uh,
mm,
weren't because they like lorded their position over me. It was because they revealed something about themselves that helped me better understand my opportunity.
mm,
And it doesn't mean that you have to reveal all your traumas or all your hardships, or your worries and sensitivities, but it does mean that you can't be guarded. You can't show up. So for example, um, I led PR and marketing for Fortune 50 companies for 25 years. That's 2.5 decades. So I'm like older than dirt, and not quite as old as dirt. And in all that time, I saw a lot of different leadership styles come in and out of vogue. Like, you
Mm,
can talk about yourself, but only in this setting, or, very contrived
mhm,
meetings uh, and team building. And that's the only time you really get to reveal something. It just felt like a test of like, am I going too far or whatever? And I was never relaxed about it. But when I finally decided to leave my big, comfy corporate PR role and move into this space of supporting women experts who knew that they should be writing a book. And so now I help women get book deals and launch their books like the marketing pros, because they're not building a brand as a company, but they themselves are a brand. They
mhm,
themselves are perhaps leading research in, human design, or helping, or they're a medical practitioner who's developed a new method for helping people heal from heartbreak. And yes, Dr. Elizabeth, I'm talking about you. And so they're leaders, but they don't have time to become a marketing expert. And so I felt a need. Am
mhm.
I a leader? I can tell you that I am leading no one, because I have help from one team member, but I don't lord that over her. But I think I show up as a leader because I'm here to serve. And many, many, many women I talk to, they never think that they're good enough, and they think, "Oh, well, I'm a leader in this lane, but I can't, but I'm not really a writer." No one thinks they're a writer, so don't worry about it. We're not trying to, write poetry. We're trying to share the insight that we have to help us all have a bigger, mind-blowing human experience while we're on Earth. And so when you think about that, when these women come and they tell me all the reasons why they feel uncomfortable sharing, well, I don't know. I wouldn't call myself an expert. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't call myself a leader. Like, but aren't you a public speaker? Well, yes. And they carry all this baggage that I don't know if that's learned, or if that's innate, or if it's just humility. But
It's very
that,
interesting what you say. It's like, I felt, it's an interesting point because I feel a lot of females, they come to me and when they're overwhelmed, they're like, I've done already so much. I did this and this. What can I do more? And my question is, what can you do less and ask for more support? And and I think that's a huge one because it's always like, I'm not enough. And this enoughness is never ending the chase. It's almost you have to redefine for yourself, like, what is the lifestyle I want? What do I desire? What is the things that for me creates a mind-blowing life, in terms of the income, in terms of the options that I want, and so on, and lead from there as well. So I think that's one pillar. And the other pillar that you addressed in terms of the sharing, I think it's all about the intention. Because when I sell, like, because as an entrepreneur, sales is important, but I create the safe space of sales. Hey, look, this is the thing. And then you are not pretending to sell, you just own it. You just say, hey, look, this is the thing, this is the space where you can join me. And when I invest, that's a different container for me. It's like I invest and I'm not, this beginner mindset is like, I invest, so I must get an ROI in the next 1 month. But I know when I invest, and that has been a huge shift for me in the past 3 years. It's like I know the ROI has been made on spot back, the energetic transfer already. And during my lifetime, this will blow up, of course, in an ROI. So, like, this is different intention. And I think even as a leader, when being in the workplace, and this happened to me as well, when I was leading my team of appointment setters and success coach, and it was in the beginning of my stage when I started out, I started to expand and I had days where I felt very low. Things, family problems, stuff happen in life. Personally, I think there is, like, for me, a fine line. Okay, this is profession and this is my private life. But because you are you, it's like you cannot just like forget about it and like, okay,
Right.
I'm like all good. But I think there is such a thing where you can control your state in a sense of like, okay, I don't feel the best, but I can execute on the most important things. And I had moments where I was on a team call with my whole team and I felt like crying because I was not doing good on the day. So I was like, should I now tell everyone about the things I'm going through or should I not? And I found that telling actually my team about certain things, it was about the intention because it came from a place of just honesty and power. Like, guys, like, yesterday I had this thing going on in the family. It impacted me. There was a loss. I feel a bit down, but I know we got stuff today to do. I just, ask for a little bit of understanding on this. And sometimes I even include them. What do you guys think? I do have this issue there, and maybe you can just provide thoughts to it. But I keep that professional towards, the main things we're gonna do, the main job. But there is a fraction of it that leads with that. And I think a lot of my team members, I have this connection, deeper connections. They know me as Ozin June beyond my title. And I found it so funny also on, LinkedIn as well. We are like coaches, best-selling author, mom, dad. Like you have so many like millions of introductions. And as you have more success, you have even more, titles. But I always say it's so hard. Like I think no one of us can be summarized in a title. So I found that getting rid of the labels, the shoulds, the things that were put on you throughout your childhood and the way you call yourself, it's about shaking this off to live a life at your own rules and understanding, okay, for the marketing purpose and for the positioning, there is a way I would call myself and to own that. But deep down, you know that your brand is beyond that one title of, I'm an executive coach or a business coach. You're more than that. But I think it's really like holding the different power and space and containers in your life and knowing what the angle is on how you use that vulnerability to lead in an empowering way. So yeah, I think this is a fraction of it, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Well,
Um,
first of all, before we even get into that, because I am getting full body chills, and I am woo woo. I mean, I used to think that was like but I am. I just learned this term, claircognizant, where when something is very true, I get full body chills, and I can't shake the body chills. And it comes out, even if it's hot outside, I'll be like, where's this coming from? So everything you said just gave me full body chills about we wear many hats and we have to know when to lean on them. And it used to be that you had to know when to reveal that part of you. But something you just said blew my mind. And that is that there has to be a purpose for tapping that, because you're not saying bring it all and lay it all out there. That's called therapy. That's different. When the women I serve, and also the weekly LinkedIn lives that I do, a lot of people say, well, here's the reason, or all these things have happened to me, or I've was married to a narcissist, or like a list of tragedies and traumas. I'm like, me too. If anyone's heard of the adverse childhood experiences scale, it's a 10-point scale of terrible things that can happen to you. I'm an 8 out of 10. This is not a badge that I would wish on anyone. But for 20 years, I would whisper these things as if they were my own doing.
Mm-hmm.
But no child hopes that her father will kill his girlfriend and that she'll have to go to the penitentiary to visit him, even though she didn't want to, and then not be allowed to talk about it. What does that do to a person? Well, I can tell you because that was me. So when I serve these women and they tell me about their whatever their things are, usually at a whisper, I say, "No, no, no. We don't whisper about ourselves because that is not about you. That happened to you and
Mhm.
you can use it. Clearly, there's something there that you want to talk about, and so you can't start by thinking that it's a secret."
Mm.
Whatever spurred you to feel like you need to share your message or your understanding or your experience or the insights that maybe you gathered when your daughter was diagnosed with childhood leukemia, which 1 in 6 children survive. I mean, it's just mind blowing how much people can bring if they actually lift the guardrail of,
Mhm.
you can share this but not that. There's You can tap into it, but like you said, at the right time,
Mm.
when there's a purpose. I want to point out, I'm going to put this below. Ozin's newsletter, Executive Personal Branding, is tremendous. It is so meaningful. And I love what you've been sharing on LinkedIn about, tapping into you were kidnapped twice. What the hey? I mean, that is harrowing. And you've shared plenty, and I won't recount everything. Just like I don't put all my traumas on the homepage of my website, but I
Mhm.
do talk about them because if I keep them secret, then I don't help people.
Yeah.
Then I make them feel shame because secrets just simmer. The shame, if you have shame in the shadows, it's just terrible. But
Mm.
when you can rise and say, look at how I'm helping people, like you are, like you're helping people really lean into how to turn their fervent belief into a thriving business practice. I
Yeah.
I'm so motivated by what you do. So I want to encourage people,
Thank
if you
you.
have.
Well, thank you so much for this. It means a lot. And I also want to congratulate you on your courage. I love that. I think courage is so much more important than the confidence. It's the thing that has led me to where I am today. It was certainly not because, I was like born extroverted. And I find it very fascinating how sometimes the best speaker and people emerge from being introverts and rather, holding back, and they turn out later to shine the most. And even like the most successful entrepreneurs, I feel that, there is this saying of like, oh, when you go through a lot of hardships, you will shine more. But I think it's a choice. I think that everyone can shine off us. We all have gifts. But I do believe, and from interviewing 150 different entrepreneurs on my own show, I realized that the people that succeed the highest, they went through a lot of shit, a lot of BS, and a lot of traumas. But it's the choice to keep going as well. And as you mentioned, in terms of the story, it's not just about listing all the things we've been through, because we all have problems and things that we went through. But again, the intention is about your mess. It could be the message to the world, and the best elevator pitch part is always the things that you're most ashamed of. And when you take the things that are what you frame as disadvantages or not good, I think it is like the blessing where your biggest highs can be. And I think when you're in that low, your character is shaped, and it really shows you on how you can lead higher in life. So how you lead in your lows shows a lot about you, how you're in your highs as well. And I think also in terms of story, what has been life changing in terms of this kidnap rape, it was in 2019 when all of this happened. And obviously a very long story, but what I've learned from all of these things is after I've gone through that and I was traumatized, a lot of trust issues, anxiety, panic attacks, couldn't trust
Yeah.
guys anymore. And a lot of women go through this terrible thing. And I just like I first couldn't speak about this because I was going through a court trial for 3 years on this, and it's been just terrifying. I was really, like locked up in place, and I could not get out, and I was like physically in pain and all of that, and I cried. And from that moment, I had one day a message of a woman reaching out to me, and she told me that she wants to commit suicide because the same guy who did this to me was doing that to her. And to give people context, it was an ex of mine, and it all escalated after 3 months. And this guy just took me into car. It was actually 3 times in a row, and the third time I disappeared. So I didn't go to school for 3 months, and I've been crying, and I got luckily found by a policeman on the streets back then at 3 a.m. in the morning, and this is how I returned back. And it's a long story, but that person did the same thing and didn't go to prison and repeated the same incidents on other women. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I need to share this. So once the court case was closed, and unfortunately it turned out that this guy didn't went to prison, because in Switzerland, although it's a great country, there are things to improve, and there is no direct law against that. So when I saw this, I was like, okay, I will share this for the women. And I told her, you need to go to a police. I will support you. I'll be there for you. And she said, yeah, he harassed me. He raped me. He put literally an axe into her car, and did a lot of like really scary things. And from that moment, I shared. So I contacted people in the UK, everywhere, organizations on domestic violence and for women empowerment. And in 2023, in January, I got to Kensington Palace, and I shared publicly my full story on rape, kidnap, and everything. And I remember before I was there speaking on stage in front of people, I was a bit nervous because I didn't know how this would turn out, and people
Right.
obviously didn't know when you're shining that you went through a lot of these horrible things. So I was like, you know what? And when I was on stage, although I'm a natural speaker and I have my points, something else happened. I felt like that was the moment not to speak into people's minds and tell them to take a notebook. It was more like, guys, I want you just to relax and have an open heart, because this will speak into your heart and souls. And I took the focus away from me. I was there just sharing my thing, but I was really speaking one-to-one to another woman just going through the same shit what I've been through. And I think shedding this light on other people, and even my business, the coachings that I do in business and in purpose, I think what helped me in this courage is really to flip the selfie stick, not to me, but to flip it to other women. And I was like, that's the thing, because that gave me courage. And me just hiding away because I'm shy, I'm too sad, like I just couldn't afford that. I just couldn't, because the pain was insane. And I was like, I have to get up for other women out there, other people. This is not just about me. It is for me, because I deserve a great life and a mind-blowing life, and we own that. But it's also for the impact as well. So it's really, I think, beyond what we do. I mean, Alice and me, we help in businesses to people thrive, market, position themselves. But it's really
Yeah.
selling programs and books. It's about you creating a mind-blowing life, and you deserve as a woman to have thriving romantic relationships. You can make all the money in the world. Again, you define what is enoughness for you. And on
Mhm.
top of that, you can also have great health. And I think a lot of women, they water down on that. And I think it's so important. If you cannot do it for yourself, do it for your loved ones, do it for other women. And when you share your story, you change literally people's destiny. Words hold so much power. This is how God created the world. So, words can really kill or save people. And I think that's also the power what Allison does with books. So again, great job to you. I'm so proud, and I've seen your
Oh
stuff.
my gosh, Azine, what you just said was so powerful, and I want to like emphasize something you said. When women, particularly, when you are feeling small, you do a lot of noticing
Mm,
and a lot of observing and and being quiet because you're hiding. And I think that that might have been how my strength of always seeing the possibility in
mm,
other people that they don't see. which is why I had a boss once who was like, "You give really flowery compliments." I'm like, "No, no, I don't. That I am effusive and I am specific because I can see people's strengths. And it's not my fault that I have a command of the English language, you know, that I'm specific. But I point this out because it's the observing that I think has given probably you and me, because you observed that woman who was in need. And I have always been observing and felt like I was on the outside looking at other people going, I really feel like she's powerful in this way or this. And so when women come to me and say, I feel like I have a book in me, and it happens every single day. Every single day I hear the same thing. I feel like I've been called to write this book. I don't know how to get it done. I don't I feel like there's but here are all the reasons why I don't think that, but I'm not an expert because I'm not this, and it takes so much time. I'm like, no, no, no. Those are self-generated boundaries. None of that is true. You can get your book out in the world so much faster than you've been led to believe. And your message, your voice, your insight has value. It is needed in the world. Out of every 10 books, one is written by a woman. One. And even now that publishing is committed to a 50-50 distribution of book deals, that's only today. It's not like they're going into libraries and removing removing books. So it will take, if you do the math, it will take at least 20 years of a 50-50 distribution of new book deals to right the ship so that what's in the world is actually 50-50, no matter what you're writing, whether you're writing about, the time you sailed around the globe, or you bought a farm in rural Connecticut and now you like tending to your ducks. This is a client of mine. Or you're writing about the infrastructure and the red tape around adoption and for adoptees. Whatever that is, it's worth it. And your experience and the insights that you have from those things, they're needed by someone else. I mean, it took me, even after I quit my job, it took me at least a year to say, I'm a book coach and a marketer. Instead of, I help women get book deals. And I'm not talking about self-publishing. There's a lot of like technology that's needed, like technical skills to be a self-publisher. A lot of like, do this algorithm, which is not my jam. But what I can do is figure out how to get a book in the world and market it so that the audience that is eager for those solutions finds it, and that it feels for that author like a service, not like we have to go find the audience and capture their attention. Like, we're not capturing anyone because we are not predators. That is nasty. Our audience is not prey. We are not hunters. We are servants. We're offering something. And I think that when you offer something that is an insight, whether it's from your expertise, whether you're the leading expert in, I don't know, acrylic paint, and impressionism, or you've become an expert from your experience of your heart being broken, that's vulnerability that you're sharing. And it's also very vulnerable to say, I know I've achieved this type of success here,
Mm-hmm.
but I also think that life is about like contributing
Mm-hmm.
to war. And there's that opportunity. You don't have to become like a full-time author. Nobody is a full-time author except J.K. Rowling and Stephen King. Even Anne Patchett has a bookstore that she works in every single day. And, that's her passion, as well
Yeah.
as writing, riveting books. So,
No, that's
when I,
so beautiful. Like one thing I'm curious of when you work with your clients and maybe from your own experience, what is the transformation that you see after that? And were there some other realizations that you didn't have before you wrote your book? And I'm saying this because I'm right now also working on my own book. It's
ooh,
called Marry Yourself, about self-worthiness. And I really realized that's the thing when people ask me, how did you make money? How did you heal from these horrible experiences? And I realized it was marrying oneself, entering a relationship deeply with yourself before, you look outwards. And when I wrote this book, I mean, obviously I know what happened to me in life and I know the lessons, but when you write it out, it's so different. You realize, oh, damn, I didn't know that I learned that. I didn't know that
right.
that was that. And then your brand actually transforms automatically through the book, not just because of the book, what it does, but the shifts that happen internally in you out of this realization after writing the book. So I'm curious to hear what do your clients experience in terms of the transformation, and what did you go through?
Well, my transformation started when I started a tiny little Facebook community of 6 people, and we started meeting every week and
Mhm.
chit-chatting about what we were working on, because when it comes down to it, I'm a writer, and I always have been, and despite the fact that I'm an expert in marketing and PR, like, when you boil that down, I'm a writer. That's, like, the core, and, so I was working on my own stuff, but we would get together as a mastermind, and every question was about, how do I pitch this? How can I position that? What should my website look like? And I was like, oh my gosh, I know the answers to all of this.
Mhm.
So instead of it being a round robin, I started giving free workshops every week for 3 years, because when you see someone in need and you think, oh my gosh, they're going to waste so much time paying for some, expensive course that's not going to deliver, because they are in a cycle of procrastinating, just learning without an action at the end.
Mhm.
That is tough. And so what I was led to do was set my own writing aside, because when I pitch something, it gets placed. But
Yeah.
that's what 25 years in publicity and marketing will do for you. Um, so now I teach my clients, like, you want to pitch a book? Okay, well, let's put together the book plan. Because if you're writing nonfiction, please do not write your entire book first. No one wants that. You write a
Mhm.
book proposal, and that is a business plan about your book. So it's not about your book. Please stop writing your book. Um, and in fact, let me share, I share a lot of resources and tips and everything in my LinkedIn newsletter called Get Your Book Published. And if that is for you, I can tell you, I mean, I share the gamut. And also, coming up, I've got a free 4-day series of your bestseller book launch, because authors are terrible marketers. They think that somebody else is going to do it. And P.S., no one is ever going to market your book or your message as well as you will. But to your question, so that's what I've learned from all these women that I've worked with is they don't realize the power of their own stories. They
Mhm.
think that they've got to package their tips or their insights, and I'm like, ooh, it's like too much telling and not enough. Take me along with you.
Yeah.
You can, if you're just packaging your method, or, I went through this, so here's my checklist of things that you should take to the hospital when when your mother is like heading to hospice. Like, wait, but we have to feel like we're there. So
Mhm.
you can't just say, believe me because this happened to me. There's the power of revealing that story. And I find that the best way for them to get in touch with that is explaining it verbally to someone,
Mhm.
or just speaking into their phone. Talk to your dog, just explain it to my dog is asleep, but she's here with me, uh, but go on a walk and explain it to the world, to the sky around you, and just capture it on your phone. You can use otter.ai or otter.io or Dragon Dictation or Claude.ai is great at this, and talk it out. Because when I say no one really is a writer, nobody is a writer, but you are your very best spokesperson.
Mhm.
And I want to hear the story, but in your voice. So the
Yeah.
best way for you to capture that and bring me along with you so I believe and can absorb what you're sharing with me, what you're directing me to do, is to show me how you know it. Maybe
Mhm.
it didn't happen to you, but maybe it's a story about someone you serve and their situation. So every book I work on, whether it's like business or finance or entrepreneurship, it's part memoir. It's part personal storytelling. It might be part research, but if you don't have personal stories and anecdotes, what you've written is a textbook, and that is a big fat bore.
Mhm.
So, and some of the most poignant, like delicious, like belly gut laughter stories are when you pair those with, and here's the insight I found, or here's 3 steps for you to, you know, build a thriving art business from your passion. It can only really take place when it's wrapped up in something that's uniquely you.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest, it's the biggest shift for people when
Mhm.
they think like, well, I mean, a lot of this happened to me, but the book isn't just about my advice. Like, well, nobody just wants your advice. We
Mhm.
want to feel like we're there with you. And
Yeah.
then they have this sudden like, "Oh, you mean I can, well, I have a lot of those." And it's such a relief for people, because
Mhm.
then they think, "Well, I have a ton of those. I mean, I could tell you stories for days." Like, "Great. Well, let's get started. Just start telling me." And, we have I use Fathom dot video, the Chrome tool, that if you're not using this, it is free and it is amazing. So it records my sessions with my clients, and and like, well, let's just talk it out. I don't want you to tell me and me to be typing like a stenographer. Just
Mhm.
explain it to me, whether it
Mhm.
was a hard thing or a like revealing thing or whatever. I
Mhm.
feel like that is the shift when people think, wow, I can actually reveal this. I can bring my whole self, but for a purpose, like you said.
Mhm.
I can share this experience, even if it's a business book. That nobody wants just like a theoretical business book. They want to know case studies, right?
Mhm.
And I think that's what you're hitting on, is that there's always a purpose. So
I
that
love.
person, those sharing those personal stories where you actually revealing something, that's where the power is.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much. There's so many golden nuggets you shared. And I love when you said that, you're taking the people alongside with you instead of just, spitting some, random information and keep it theoretical. And I think one of the other things that I've realized is many people, they speak about, find your voice, find your brand voice. But one of the deeper things is not even about finding the voice, it's just taking the veil away of who you already are. And I found this in my journey that I was never like trying to find my voice. I feel that this voice was already in me. It's like when people and clients come to you, the only thing they do is you learn over the time, even as an entrepreneur, to express and blossom like nicer. It's like almost like a flower, and it goes up, you share one thing, and then you feel maturity of time and your leadership, and you share more. And the flower is just like beautifully blossoming in waves, and it has different branches as well, like later in trees. And I think that in stories, it's like from a business perspective, because as a business mentor, I help people also, to use their stories to sell what transformation they're helping people with. And people, the biggest mistake I see people doing is like they feel like you have to share every single detail in their thing, and then they say like this is the product. But I always say, like, keep it simple. There's so much you have going on, and you have to create different story fractions out of that. And then like story bits, this is how I call it. And then you have framework. For example, when you were like, in my case, I went through abuse, kidnap, rape. And then I help women to overcome certain traumas, and from there to heal up and transition into a healthy relationship. Now, if that is my offer, then I would use obviously my story, because that is now relevant in what I have to offer, and use a very simple thing on how I solved this problem, so to say, to myself, and got into that. And the same thing is like for marketing. I think it's really like taking that bit, like, okay, you couldn't get certain clients and you have no system in place, you were always burned out, and that's a story that's already enough. And you tied it into how this impacted your health, your family life, and things. But now you got a framework, and now you use that to share, like, hey, if that's you and you're speaking to that person who struggles, then you're taking them alongside. It's not just like, hey, you want to make 6 figures, hey, you want to, I think context is important. And I think this is where you can, even as a business owner, creator, you stand so much out when you just speak the truth the way it is. You own where you at, you say the way it is, and you go a little bit deeper than anyone else. And when it gets deep, things have different dualities, different things are at the same time truth, because it's that deep. And I think when you shed this, different leadership into a context, this is where you pick people up with your story, and, go out there and you sell without realizing you're selling, actually, because you're just telling an empowered story.
Right. So let's talk about inspiration. Like when you look around for inspiration and strength from people who are really tapping it and doing it right, who comes to mind?
Oh, many people. I think that honestly, without lying, the first person that pops up to my life is my mom. I could mention a lot of mentors, a lot of entrepreneurs out there, really many. But it's just like, for me, my mom has been my biggest mentor. And although we didn't see always eye to eye, or, entrepreneurship, it's always like special case, especially coming from an Asian family and you drop out of university. It's like, oh, like, how dare you doing that? You didn't finish your studies. So she was like a lot concerned, and this is a typical thing that you go through as an entrepreneur, that people sometimes don't believe in you and they're worried. But what I realized is that one of the things my mom has taught me is always like tough love. It's not necessarily always about like be kind. Like, yes, to be kind, but for me, being truly kind means embodying this tough love. And tough love sometimes is in a way a bit brutal, because you got to say the hard things, you got to lead with conversations that are sometimes tough. But I've realized that this thing that my mom embodied in her own life, because she has an illness and she almost died a few years ago, and she's been going through horrible things as well, betrayal and other stuff, while she was almost dying. And when I saw her just leading through that courage, This is something that, and a characteristic as an entrepreneur that has helped me. And that's why I see the inspiration in my household, but I also see the inspiration, to be honest, in the things that were negative. This is the reframe, and I see a lot of entrepreneurs saying, I turn my pain into a purpose. But also there's a narrative of like, when you look around, the things that you find injustices for, things that were unfair, I feel this is where a lot of people start to raise their voice for impact, because I start to find it unfair. Why does every woman go through this rape, kidnap thing? Oh my God, it's like every second woman I speak to has some sort of story. Like
Yeah.
it's a trend. And I was like, that's unfair. Woman empowerment is going to a thing where feminism is so aggressively portrayed that it comes off as if we tear down men. But I believe in God's design, we need men and women, and true women empowerment cannot happen without including men. So the narrative around a lot of things as I was a child and growing up, I found it like unfair. And from that moment, even, seeing my family trading their, hours for work and for money, and that from a financial perspective, all of that has led me to, stand up, share the things. The reason why I do business coaching, it's for the financial part. It's also for the freedom, because you can spend more time with your loved ones and partner. But as we mentioned earlier, for those who missed out, it's really, again, mind-blowing life. You're doing business, and sometimes you have to remind yourself in your journey, because you're so much in your work that you actually forget, why did I start? And when you create so much of the stress around you, the good news is you're the boss, so you can take care of and clean up, what is not good and leaky in your energy and your leadership. And this is where, again, I found the core, the inspiration is just daily waking up, and I just realized, okay, the fact that I'm breathing, that I'm here, especially when you went through health implications, it's like, this is already the inspiration of the day. The fact that you're just living and breathing. And then number two, if you have parents that were here for you, and although they stressed you out, I think for me, that is one thing. I didn't have a dad, but always growing up with my mom. And entrepreneurial as well, like yourself. When I meet other women who are in their power, this is so inspiring. I'm like, oh my God, there are so many strong women. It's such an art to be a woman. And it makes me cry when I see like stories like that. Like it touches me. I'm very sensitive, and we women are very emotionally wired to that. And I think it's so beautiful when you know that being too much, being intense, feeling very sensitive with things, it can be your cutting edge, because you have a deeper empathy in the world on that, and you feel things. And I think the best artists, people, they emerge because they are that deep. So yeah, I think the inspiration is for me every day. My boyfriend inspires me, the cat can inspire me, the nature, the being, and other entrepreneur, when I see their story, I'm like, oh my God. And it gets me up. That's why I do the same for others. And you never know, who is looking up secretly to you. There are so many secret fans that you have, or people who would never like or engage with you, but they're always the ones who watch you, and they're actually glad that you're there. Like maybe they shifted their life without you knowing that.
Yeah.
But
I love what you just said. There, well, the taking time to notice the inspiration is something that I think people don't do that often, because we live such busy lives. And something that I learned from Lawrence Kazan Cassini, who just made a comment about inspiration from negative events. And Lawrence, he retired from his very successful businesses in his late 50s, and by 2 years or 3 years later, he had started another business, because he was like, I'm not done being productive. And he's so insightful. He's 78. He rides horses every day. I mean, this guy, he just never stops. And I find such inspiration and motivation from his noticing and appreciating the journey, rather than what he said was, rather than the milestones along the journey, or just focusing on the end, which is maybe a very American thing to do. So similarly to Lawrence, I had a colleague once in my Unilever days, and this guy was a New Zealander. He was a Kiwi. He was lovely. He was a business leader. And he often talked about how he and his partner, his wife, would once a year at the new year, they would go down by the lake and talk about what they wanted their life to be like in the next year, and what they had achieved and what they had noticed. And they would have an intentional conversation about that. And that was not that long ago. And today he is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. His name is Christopher Luxon, and he was lovely then and he's lovely now. The thing that drove him was almost like the noticing of what's going on in the world around you and feeling indignant about the need. I mean, that's what drives me intensely, of like, I can't believe no one's doing this. I'm going to do it, you know? And I'm a little bit more spicy than he is, but he is so intentional. And Lawrence is so intentional. And you are so intentional in using that vulnerability and having the courage to actually ask yourself, how can I contribute? What do I want? How can I make this a mind-blowing life? I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing so much. And let me share again, if your newsletter on LinkedIn, the Executive Personal Branding, is so meaningful. I absolutely love it. And I love how you're supporting people in tapping into their strength. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison, as well. I love your work, and maybe there's a lot of interesting discussion since I'm also writing my own book. And
we'll be talking about that for sure.
Yes, I think there's so many great things when you write your own book, not just like from a business perspective and more authority and clients, but it's just like for this human life experience. I think everyone should write at least one book in their life. Like, I don't want to put this label should, but like in a positive manner, like it could be a great idea. Like even as a mom or dad, like who knows, maybe your inspiration, something strikes you and you never know. But everyone has so many great ideas. I think it's really about taking this one idea, and I have this one rule. It's called the 10-minute rule. I have an idea and I make sure that within the next 10 minutes, I take the first step towards that idea. And that has changed so many things. And if it's obviously a bigger commitment, then you need to know your priorities as a business owner too. But if it's relevant in your mission, I think it's just with the book, just to get ahead and start writing and getting conversation with Allison.
You only need a pencil. There's no one, you don't need permission to be a writer. Just, you need a pencil, and you write one thing, you're a writer. So you don't have to do anything else. Just start jotting down whatever your thoughts are, and you can do it. Okay. I love it. Thank you. And I will see you next time.
Bye.